Hello and welcome to this week's Rights in Russia interview. I'm Mary Page, and our guest today is Andrea Gullotta, an expert in the history of the Gulag and currently a lecturer at the University of Glasgow. Dr. Gullotta is president of Memorial Italia, which is an organization inspired by the International Memorial Society in Moscow. He's been closely following developments around Memorial and has had a particular interest in the case of Yuri Dmitriev, the former head of Memorial's Karelia branch, who is now in prison. Andrea is the author of the book Intellectual Life and Literature at Solovki Prison Camp, 1923 to 1930. He's the creator of the virtual exhibition Beauty in Hell, Culture in the Gulag, and editor-in-chief of Autobiographia, a journal on personal histories and the representation of self in Russian culture. Some of his latest work includes the article, I Feel, I Know, I Am Immortal, literary works in the newspapers of Soviet prisons and camps in the 1920s, and a piece in an edited volume with the title, More Than a Cat, Reflections on Shalamov's and Solzhenitsyn's writings through the perspective of trauma studies. This is a fascinating and varied intellectual output, Andrea, and we're looking forward to our time together, which will be about 30 minutes. So thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the nice words you're saying. Thank you.
So you're a historian of the Gulag, and more particularly the intellectual and cultural life of the Gulag. What sparked your interest in this subject?
It's been a series of things, but mainly it's been a random meeting I had with Irina Fliga, who is the head of the branch of Memorial in St. Petersburg. I was about to start my PhD when I met her at a conference in Italy, and she had this talk about the victims and the problems of the memory of the victims, especially in Sandarmoch and Levashovo. And I was absolutely thrilled, and I realized that this was a topic that had so much that had to be discovered. And then as a literary scholar, which was basically my first, really my first sort of protocol, I'm supposed to be a literary scholar first, but then with time I became also a cultural historian and historian as well, in a way. I realized that there was so much that had to be studied for the literature of the Gulag in particular. And that's where it all started and never finished so far.
Oh, that's great. So closely related topics in which you're interested are historical memory and what have come to be known as the memory wars. Could you explain what this means in particular in the Russian context?
Yes, as I said, I've always worked as a literary scholar and a cultural historian, but then because of the particular situation of the memory of the Gulag in Russia, I have been able to witness directly a series of changes that have occurred in how the memory of the Gulag has been, and in general, I would say, of Soviet repressions, not just the Gulag, have been modified and changed and discussed and debated, negotiated over the years by different actors, both institutional and not. And so I've been working for quite a long time to what is called an autoethnography. So a sort of an autobiographical research, which is based on my experience as a researcher, but also on what I have seen on how the memory has changed. And I have witnessed over the years that there's definitely a memory war going on. There's different ways of interpreting the memory of the Gulag and how it should be said and how it should be used. And in this very last few years, what used to be probably maybe just a basic conflict has become an open war. And I think the latest events probably confirm that.
In your view, what is the Russian organization Memorial and why is it important for Russia?
Memorial is extremely important for a variety of reasons. Well, first of all, Memorial has been the first NGO, the first Russian NGO as we intended. And it was formed with a bottom-up approach. It was formed from the need of the Soviet people that finally could discuss what happened during the Stalinist repressions and overall during the period of the Soviet Union with all the different waves of repression. So it started by people coming together and then working together as a group, and then eventually as an association, and then eventually as an NGO, a research center, and so on, trying to keep as much as possible the memory of what had happened. And so they created huge archives based on interviews and memoirs and what in Russian are called anketes, so which are like blanks. They were using questionnaires that were used to record as many lives as possible. And this way, they've recovered thousands of lives. And at the same time, they managed to get copies of documents from the archives when they were open, which then eventually were closed. So Memorial holds in the archives a lot of these materials, which are absolutely unique. And at the same time, in parallel with this, they've done a huge work over this 30 years through projects and initiatives and educational initiatives as well, to foster the memory and make it active as much as possible through exhibitions as well. And so their role has been fundamental, especially in those years where the Russian state has really not paid that much attention to the memory of the Gulag, which was quite important in the years between the collapse of the USSR and the beginning of the Russian Federation. But then it was somehow abandoned by the state. And in those years, Memorial and a few other organizations have kept this memory alive, have kept on working on it and constructing a democratic approach to what memory is and how it should be lived. And over the last few years, which has been the start in a way of the memory war, there has been a tendency by a series of institutions to try to seize that memory and to propose a different way of interpreting the past. And so this is where Memorial is important, because it somehow keeps the democratic nature of the memory, which comes from a bottom-up approach through the lives of people that came spontaneously to Memorial and give their witness. And so Memorial, in a way, is the champion of a democratic idea of memory that in Russia is risking to be lost in this moment.
Would you have a specific example of a reinterpretation?
Well, yes, there are a few, but I think the most important and prominent one is what is happening in Sandarmokh and what has happened over the last few years with Sandarmokh, which is, for those people that are listening that maybe are not into the facts, Sandarmokh was an execution camp, not a camp, a site where more than 7,000 people were executed and buried. No one knew about this until a few researchers, most of them of Memorial, in particular, Yuri Dmitriev from Memorial in Petrozavodsk, Irina Flige and Veniamin Yofiev from Memorial in St. Petersburg, and a member of the parliament, Ivan Chukhin, who unfortunately died shortly before the site was discovered. They tried to look for this site in different ways, and by matching their research, they finally found the place. And the place over time became a memorial cemetery where people would go there. It's a place lost in the bushes, and people just go there and have, over the years, have hung to the trees the images of the people who were killed, and there were many monuments erected and so on. There were many commemorations done, in particular the one on the 5th of August, which happens every year. And well, at a certain point, the state, which had always participated in that, in those commemorations, sort of withdrew. And soon after that, Yuri Dmitriev was arrested. And a few years down the line, well, actually not many years down the line, 1 or 2 years down the line, one bizarre historical theory that says that that place was not a place where victims of Stalinism are buried, but soldiers of a Red Army killed by the Finns. So this theory was moved forward. Is a theory that has no document, no archival document at the base of it, that the vast majority, if not the totality nearly, of academics and scholars believe is absolutely wrong. Still, the place has been dug up in search of these victims, which so far have not been found. And so there is a clear attempt to rewrite completely Sandarmokh. And for those listeners who are willing to know more, there's a fantastic website called the Dmitriev Affair, where there's the whole story described in details. And I invite everyone to go and visit that website.
Great, thanks so much. Could you tell us about the current state of play with regard to the moves by Russian authorities to close down Memorial?
Well, the situation is actually quite difficult, if not desperate. We have the so-called last chance. So the on the 28th of December, there was the decision to shut down Memorial, but the decision has not been put into force still because there has been an appeal. And the appeal will take place on the 28th of February, so in a few days. And depending on what the result will be, and I have to say, everybody here believes that unfortunately it will be a confirmation of that first instance. But of course, we're always ready to be surprised, and we'll be very happy to be surprised. So if that that decision will stand, then it means that Memorial will be officially closed, and Memorial International will be officially closed in Russia. There is a separate case of the Human Rights Memorial, which is a separate office of Memorial. That is in a separate trial led by a Moscow tribunal. And the appeal is still, it's a separate, that we don't have a date for the appeal. And then, I mean, Memorial still exists in other branches and it still exists abroad. I mean, our association is independent officially from International Memorial, but we are part of the network and we collaborate constantly and work with our friends. And what they keep on telling us is that whatever the outcome of this trial, Memorial will survive because what they have done over the years cannot be shut down by a judge.
So is this a real legal process, or is it just the appearance of a trial? Is there any doubt that the courts won't do what the authorities want?
Well, as I said, we are not particularly positive about what may happen on the 28th. And this is because we have seen in the past that there seems to be quite a direct connection between certain events and then other events. So to make it more open, there has been a meeting of the Committee for Human Rights at the office of the President Putin, to which Putin himself said quite openly that Memorial is an association that breaks the law on foreign agents, and a few days down the line, it was shut down. So there are things that, of course, I mean, as a historian, I always say I need to wait to see documents to say that things are exactly as they are. And so I tend to be cautious, and one day we will see the documents, if we will, and we will be able to reconstruct exactly what's happened. But it is quite clear that there is some sort of direct link between certain things that are said and then events that happen. At the same time, the Memorial is doing everything they can to keep things within the framework, within the legal framework of Russia. And so every time we speak to them, they say that what they are doing is always in line with law, and all the actions that they're taking also to preserve what they have. It's all done within the legal framework that is currently active in Russia today. How this can be bent or not is a separate story. The case of Dmitry, for example, has shown us that there have been judges who have been receptive of the fact that it was clear that the accusations were not real. But then Supreme Court has changed always the outcome of these trials, and so things have returned somehow to a worse scenario, and every time it has been like this. So it's a bit difficult to answer to this question in a clear way. Let's say that I always say this. I always hope that the laws that are in place will be respected, and that they will guarantee a positive outcome, because it's also in the benefit of Russia.
And so why do the authorities want to close down Memorial? What are they afraid of?
Well, yes, there is, again, we will find out exactly why in the future. But what I can tell you is that there are different opinions between different types. So I can make you like a sort of a brief recap of what people think about why it's happening right now. So there's a group of people and scholars that say that the main problem is exactly the memory of the Gulag, and the fact that Memorial has been independent, has been the independent voice that has told the story as it is. Another concrete example of the differences between this interpretation of the past is that there is a clear intention by institutions, which has, by the way, been confirmed by Putin himself when he opened the monument for the victims of the Gulag in 2017, to say that, yes, the Gulag is a horrible page, we should remember it, but we should never settle scores with the past. And Memorial publishes the names of the perpetrators, of the killers, which, so these are sort of two tendencies which are completely at the opposite and are somehow creating tension between these two sort of contenders of memory, if we can say that. At the same time, there are a group of other people who believe that the main issue is the interest that Memorial has had for the human rights ever since its birth. Memorial has done huge activity in the protection of human rights in Russia, for example, in Chechnya, through people like Sergei Kovalyov, Andrei Mironov, who actually died on the field, Natalia Stimirova, who was killed as well, and so on. And even in current days, is still one of the most important human rights watch in Russia and in overall in the post-Soviet space. So there is a tendency to believe that maybe there's something wrong with that. They're not happy with that, and they're trying to. And then there's a third sort of interpretation that says that there is probably something happening overall in Russia. That's sort of the long wave of the Navalny. Well, first the Bolotnaya, then the Navalny, and then let's say these days, that in a way the idea is that the opposition is gaining too much momentum. Opposition here, we don't mean Memorial is not part of the opposition, it's just an independent voice, it's not involved in any politics as we intended, but it is a voice that's not in agreement with the government. And so some see a long wave, a long attempt to shut all these voices down. And some of them even relate them to what's happening right now with Ukraine. But of course, I'm just calling names, I'm not saying what I think.
Right. So I was going to ask you why it's happening now. If there is this a particular moment, why didn't they do it earlier? And what's changed that they would act now?
Well, I don't know exactly, but I do see, well, this is my personal opinion now, I do see that there has been quite an impressive twist over the last few months. Memorial has always been under pressure, let's say. I started working with Memorial in 2007, and already back then, for example, the office in St. Petersburg has a door that closes only from the inside to avoid attacks and so on. It's always been somehow under pressure. In 2012, the law on foreign agents has made the situation worse, but over the years, it's been clear that at the end of the day, it was just fines and sort of other types of events and attacks that were not really blocking the work. And then what's happened has been incredibly fast. On the 11th of November, there was this request to shut down Memorial, and in a month and a half, Memorial was shut down, and now we're 10 days away probably from what it could be its end. It's quite difficult to understand why right now, but overall, let's say that it seems like that there is a series of situations that you see also overall with human rights in Russia. Like it's the other day that we've heard, for example, of a teacher in St. Petersburg who has been sacked for making their students read the poems of poets who were executed or arrested during Stalin's Great Terror. And the person that sacked her said openly that the problem is that these people were enemies of the people. So there are a few things that are happening overall in society where it seems that these sort of situations are gaining more and more momentum, and there is an attempt to shut down these independent voices. Why it's that exactly, it's hard to say, but it's clear that something is happening right now.
Mhm. You've mentioned, and I know that you closely followed the prosecution of Yuri Dmitriev, the Gulag historian who headed Memorial's branch in Karelia. Could you tell us a little more about that? Why his sentence has been sort of significantly extended over the years, and why is this so important? Why the emphasis on this person?
Well, again, it's one of those situations that are quite difficult to interpret, but it is definitely something that's very important. Well, first of all, it is important because, as I said, within the context of the memory war on the Gulag that's going on for quite a while, this has been probably the most important act of aggression, let's say, together now with the closure of Memorial. At the same time, it's important because uh, the fact that they've been targeting a historian and that the accusations against him have been so weak to the point that many experts called in all the trials have clearly shown that the accusations were not serious.
And what were the accusations?
The accusations have been initially of making pedopornographic material. And these are related to the fact that Dmitriev took 9 photos of his daughter, of his stepdaughter, which is actually foster daughter, when she was naked. But he did that as under the advice of social services. And this is a practice that has been done and never circulated them. And the type of photographs was justified by the experts during the trials, had no characters of pedopornography whatsoever. They're just a photograph taken to show that the girl was in good health because she came with severe malnutrition from a house for children where she was taken. And there was an incident where he used a master plaster on her. And the school thought that the ink signs, the ink stains that remained on the girl's skin were not, were the sign of beatings, but then it was clarified it was not the case. And so there was this advice that he should take these photographs. And anyway, as I said, he was acquitted from this specific charge. The first time he was completely acquitted, and then the process was cancelled. During the first trial, he was condemned only for holding a piece of rifle in his garage, not a weapon, but it was still considered a weapon, as in not a weapon that could be used. It was just a piece of rifle. The second time, when the trial started again, the accusation became worse. It was the accusation of doing also like having done an abuse on the girl. And it came clear from the trial and also from journalistic inquiries that the so-called abuse was the fact that the girl suffered from enuresis. And so Dmitriev, like any other father, when had to check if the girl had had an accident, let's say, would touch the bottom parts to see if it was wet or not. So this was the abuse. And it came clear as part of the trial as well that this sort of accusation, which came from what the girl said, came in a situation of psychological pressure where there were people in a room asking constantly, this girl, has he been? So, and independent experts have confirmed that this was a situation of pressure that the girl was under. And so at the end of the second trial, Dmitriev was sentenced to 3.5 years, which is nearly 4 times less than what the penal code requires for this charges. And at the same time, there have been 2 interesting things that happened. Is that Dmitriev somehow admitted the guilt for the rifle, but he was acquitted for that. And the other thing which was interesting is that was exactly the same time pretty much that he had already spent in jail. And so in a way, it was a form of acquittal, especially if you put it in the context of how minimal are the chances of getting acquittal in the Russian penal system. And we're talking far less than 1%. But this second trial again was cancelled. And a sentence of 13 years was imposed by the Supreme Court of Karelia, and a third trial for the same charges was started, and it finished on the 27th of December, just the day before the liquidation, the shutdown of Memorial International. And this time he was charged, and now the sentence is 15 years. And it's clear that there has been a continuous attempt to jail this person. And the reason is that this person, most probably the reason is that this person represents a type of independent scholar, an independent historian, who has always worked all his life to restore the memory of the people based on who they are, and not based on any sort of narrative underneath. And Dmitriev himself, during all this time, has been absolutely heroic in how he's withstood the situation, and he's worked on a book in the few times of freedom that he's been given in between trials. And in one of these books, he's written, in this book is written that the reason why he's been attacked is that he's proposing a different idea of state and citizen relationship. Not that the citizen should do everything for the state, but that the state should do everything for the citizen, including restoring its memory and keeping the rights active. And this is why he's attacked. These are his words, and I do believe that there's something true in that.
Thank you. These issues we've been discussing, memory of the Soviet era repressions, the memory wars, the crackdown on Memorial and on civic activists, how do you see these playing out in the near future and then in the longer term?
Well, in the near future, I have to say that I do expect that, unfortunately, Memorial International may finish existing as it exists today. But as I said, I do believe that our Russian colleagues are right in saying that what they have done cannot be closed down, shut down just with a trial like this. There is something quite important, I think, that must be underlined in all this story. The Dmitriev case and now this attack on Memorial have shown that there is a huge amount of people in Russia right now that want to keep this memory alive and want to keep it independent as it has been. And if anything, these cases have even made more people go on that side of the fence, in a way, of the front, actually, since we're talking about the war, memory war. And so in the long term, I believe that this is one of the situations that no matter how much they're trying to put the nails on the coffin, I think the person inside is not dead and would not be dead. There is something that has been done over the decades that has stuck and will stick still. And it's something important, not just for Russia. I think it's important for everyone. I think it's a universal thing. And it's important that we speak about this also in English, as we are right now, and in other countries and in other places. Because what happened in the Soviet Union, the memory of the Gulag, and what's happening right now as well, it's something that deals with who we are as people, the memory of what's happening and what's happened, and the importance of human rights, something that should be underlined always. And it's something that pertains each of us. And so while in the short term, probably Memorial will be shut down, and probably may even be that there will be further actions, and I hope not, even worse than that. I think in the long run, in the long term, you cannot shut down memory. You cannot cancel with a trial what has been done over decades of social work and civil work on the memory, on who we are and who we are historically. And I think this applies to not only to Memorial, but also to all the other NGOs and associations that have been under attack.
Excellent. I'm afraid we've reached the end of our time together. Many thanks, Andrea Gullotta, for appearing on Rights in Russia and sharing your perspective on historical and cultural memory in Russia, and, as you say, in other places as well. We look forward to reading more of your work and seeing you again on Rights in Russia, perhaps.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mary, and thanks to Rights in Russia for finding the time to talk about this.